Have you ever loved the design of a quilt so much that you didn't want to add binding to it because it would distract from the design? What if I showed you today that there's a different method to finish your quilts? I have a quilt block right here that I really love, and the edges are completely finished. This is quilt facing. In today's video, I'm going to show you my method of sewing on quilt facing, which achieves this beautiful polished look that does not distract from the quilting design. Hi, I'm Elena, and on this channel, I simplify quilting and make it more enjoyable by sharing time-saving techniques and comprehensive tutorials. If you're excited to learn how to finish your small quilts using quilt facing, click the like button and remember to subscribe to my channel to not miss out on any future quilting tutorials. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you will receive a free quilt pattern. To make my quilt facing today, I'm going to be using 4 strips of fabric that are 2 inches wide, and they are the same color as the backing on my quilt because I don't want this to be too visible. 2 of these strips are cut at the exact length of the height of my quilt, so the left and the right side, and 2 of them are a little bit longer than what I need them to be. In order to cut my fabric, I used a rotary cutter, a ruler, and a cutting mat, but to put the facing on after you've done this process, you should only need scissors. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch foot, or if you do not have a 1/4 inch foot for your sewing machine, you can use diagonal seam tape, and you will see this attached to my sewing machine. I'm going to use a clover hot hemming ruler, and this is 4 inches by 14 inches. I'm going to be using just school glue, Elmer's school glue. I like to go with this Craft Bond because it has a precision tip applicator, and this is what's going to help me attach and baste my facing on. I'm going to use thread for piecing. I generally use Superior Thread So Fine Color 401. This is a 50 weight thread and it's pretty strong. And to hand stitch my facing to the back of my quilt, I'm using this nice embroidery thread. It has a little sheen to it, and it's a color that matches. But as you can see, this is a little bit slippery and this might cause trouble at my sewing machine, so I like to use this little mesh that goes over it. Once the thread feeds to your sewing machine, it's going to prevent it from slipping, but it's also not going to get it caught in the mesh. So it creates really nice tension having that mesh on top of it. In my sewing machine, I'm going to have a 9014 needle, just a universal needle. I'm going to be using some pins, some clips, and just a regular hand sewing needle. I like to use something that is, I like to use something that is very fine in order to hand stitch the facing to my quilt. So what is quilt facing? Quilt facing is when you want to finish the edges, the raw edges of your quilt. As you can see, you can still see the sandwich layered in here, which is the front of my quilt, the back of my quilt, and the batting in between. I want to finish these edges in a nice way, but I don't want that to be visible outside on the front of my quilt if I want to turn this into a wall hanging. And I'm going to show you what this looks like. I have this wall hanging right here, and this is finished just with traditional binding. I put it on as I would on a regular quilt, so you can see the edge all the way on the back and you can see it on the front as well. So this creates a really nice frame, and there are pieces where I do like to see this little frame for my piece, but there are times when I want the quilt to stand out without the frame, and I'm going to show you on this piece. This is quite a large one where I finished the edges of my quilt, but I finished them in such a way that you cannot see the batting or anything raw. Any raw edges are not visible because everything is enclosed within the seam on the back, this facing on the back. Well, the facing, as you can see, is the same color as the backing fabric, so it kind of blends in, but on the front it gives me this really nice, pretty finished edge. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today with my lion. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hot ruler. The reason I like to use this is because it allows me to iron over it. It's kind of like a felt surface. And I'm going to fold one edge of all of my 4 strips wrong sides together, 1/2 inch in. So the way I like to do that is I place my strip down. I place my ruler over it. And as you can see right here, that is the 1/2 inch line. I'm going to bring that over to that. Let's start at the edge. And using the tip of my iron, hot iron, I'm going to fold 1/2 inch down. Once you remove your ruler, you can definitely go over it again and have it pressed really well. It would help if you wanted to starch this, but I am not that particular when it comes to starching. I also like to do things quickly, and starching them is just taking a little bit of time. Once you finish pressing your strips of facing, you will separate the shorter ones and put those aside, and you will work with the longer strips that you have. Again, the measurement for this long strip is not as important right now. It just needs to be longer by 1 inch or so than the horizontal side of your quilt, so the top or the bottom. You're going to take your 2 strips of fabric and the raw edge that is not folded, you're going to align it to the top and to the bottom of your piece. So right here, I'm lining it at the top, and you will actually, if you pay attention, you'll see a few stitch holes in here. It's because I already did this and I had to undo it because I did it on the wrong side of my project. I did it on the back side. So make sure that you are having your project right side up and your facing piece right side down. So right sides together. You can clip it or you can pin it. I'm going to do both, and I'm going to do both at the same time. So that means I'm going to go to my sewing machine and stitch both. What we're going to do is sew a 1/4 inch away from the top edge, but also we're going to come down and sew a 1/4 inch away on each side, just for the length of this facing, for the width of the facing, and I'll show you at the sewing machine. Before I get to the sewing machine though, I'm going to flip it over and make sure that I have not accidentally clipped the back of my quilt like that, because even though it might not be shown later on, it will create a little bit of bulk that I do not want to deal with right now. So let me do this side. I'm going to flip it over and do the bottom side. On my sewing machine, I have a 9014 needle. I have a 1/4 inch presser foot, and if you don't have a presser foot, if you have this diagonal seam tape, you can use that. I have stated in one of my previous videos how to attach it, but basically just a quick crash course if you haven't seen that video. You line up the red line with a center line where your needle is going to be. So in my case, it's going to be the center of this presser foot. The black line indicates on either side a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can line up your project straight with the black line, or if you have a 1/4 inch foot like I do, you can line it up with that. Again, make sure your project is right side up, and that, again, as you can see, I've already stitched this on the wrong side of my project, so I'm going to restitch it, and this folded edge is not the one that's going to be sewn right now. Additionally, my stitch length is 2.5 millimeters. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch starting from here and going all the way down like this, and then we're going to sew all the way this way. So let's begin. First, when I start stitching, I'm going to line up my quilt because my fabric is a little bit longer. I cannot see underneath exactly where my 1/4 inch line is. I'm holding on to my thread, and I'm going to reinforce my stitches in the beginning of this facing, and that's pretty much the only place where I'll be reinforcing my stitches. I'm not even going to clip my threads, I'm just going to rotate my project. Line it up with my black line or with my 1/4 inch foot. I have stitched over my pins a long time ago, and I will never do that again. One thing that I do want to mention is when you are ending your stitch right here, I try to end exactly onto the facing or maybe a little bit under, because once you're flipping this, oh, I'm sorry, I moved the camera. Once you're flipping this inside out, what's going to happen is this little white stitch might show. So if you want to go over your facing a little bit, that's fine. Just make sure you use a thread that will match the background fabric of your quilt. In case you stitch a little bit too far towards the side, then your thread will blend in. Now that you have sewn top and bottom of your quilt, what you're going to do is grab the shorter pieces and we're going to lay them on each side, left and right side. So as you can see, I'm going to line it up with the middle, match those raw edges, and I'm going to pin in a few places, but I'm not going to go all the way. The way we sew the sides is going to be slightly different than we did the top and the bottom. So I'll put 3 pins here. Make sure I'm grabbing all the layers. Line that up. 1 pin here and 1 here. And now you're going to use your scissors and you're going to trim about this much within your quilt facing. You want to trim a little bit less than the seam allowance that you use for the top and the bottom. You don't want it to go over. So just use your scissors, eyeball it a little bit. Eyeballing is a legitimate unit of measurement, just so you know. Let me check on this side, right about there. Trim that off. So now your quilt facing is encased within that edge. And we're going to do that on both sides. I'm not too worried about these overhanging pieces right now. Match the center. Just a couple more pins. And I'm going to trim this side the same way I did the other one. So I'm just going to look, clip, and I can see where that clip has been made. I'm going to cut it all the way. Oops. And do the same on this side. Fold it over, peek through, clip it. And now we're going to go stitch a 1/4 inch away, all the way from one end to the other. Now that all 4 sides are stitched, I'm going to trim off this excess. The easiest way to do that is to flip your project over and just follow the edge of your quilt. When you do that, make sure you're not accidentally clipping this one. And at the same time, you can clip the rest of your threads. Once everything is clipped, you're going to take your iron, your hot iron, and you're going to gently press this open, and then you can flip it to the back. I will show you how to do that in a second. Once I have pressed it open, what you want to do is fold it exactly onto that stitch line, and you're going to press directly onto that stitch line. This way you will have all this folded. Another thing that you can do that's going to help you, but you're going to need matching thread for your backing fabric, is to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from this edge. So this will help your quilt facing lay a little bit more flat. I'm not going to do that today, but that is definitely an option that you have. What I'm showing you right now is just one way to do quilt facing. There are many more ways out there on how to do this. So I'm going to start with the sides, and I'm going to press this down. And after I press it down, I'm actually going to put a few clips because I want that edge to be pressed. Another thing that you can do, and I'm actually going to do that now, is in this little corner right here, there's a 1/4 inch corner. I'm going to clip it off. I want to make sure I'm not actually clipping off into the stitches that are holding on my facing on. So I'm just clipping a few stitches away, just shy of a 1/4 inch, to reduce the bulk in this corner. So let's fold this down like that. The key to having this folded is so that on the front side you will not see the facing at all. So as soon as you press it, you can either pin it, which might actually work better than clipping it because the seam allowance is so small. Let me grab a couple of pins, and then I can press it again. Having these pins in place will also help me stitch it by hand in the next step. So you can go ahead and do this on both sides, and then I will show you how we're going to do the top and the bottom. This is what it will look like on the front side. As you can see, you cannot see that facing, and if you can, it's all you need to do is roll it up just a little bit more. Just pull it to the back a little bit more, and you can do that as well in the sewing process when you sew it by hand. Now that you have your left and right side pinned to the back, what you're going to do is grab either a stiletto or a point turning tool, or if you have blunt scissors, you can do it with that. I would be very, very careful using scissors. I have a stiletto that I've made. It's made out of a chopstick, so you can grab a chopstick too. And you're going to turn this inside out. When you do that, you want to poke these corners out. As you can see, it's a little bit wrinkly. So gently stick your stiletto or turning tool in here. When you do it gently so you do not press through the fabric. I've done that in the past. And you want to make sure that these corners are nice and poked out. I know what you're thinking. You're going to go to the sewing machine and sew this, but we are done with the sewing machine at this point. What you would normally do, and I'm not doing that right now because I want to stitch this by hand, relaxing watching TV with my husband tonight. What you are going to do now is you're going to stitch by hand using your preferred method of sewing binding, either using a little stitch, just one tiny bite of fabric and thread, or you can use a ladder stitch. Personally, I prefer ladder stitches. And you're going to sew the right side and the left side. Once you do that, you will flip this over and you will stitch this side. So what I am doing now, however, even if I am not stitching this right now by hand, I am going to press it. So I'm going to press this open like we did with the other side. It's okay if it doesn't go all the way. And then I'm going to grab more pins and I'm going to pin this side. When it's time for me to stitch this by hand, I can very easily take this pin off, flip this, finish stitching that. But having this pressed and having it stay together like that until tonight when I'm going to stitch it with my husband, that's going to allow this fabric to have fabric memory and stay folded even better that way. So right now I'm just pressing it and leaving it to be to stay pressed throughout the day. Now I have pinned this side and I'm going to press it. When you do press it, make sure that you have indeed poked these little corners out so they are as square as possible when you sew it, when you stitch it by hand. I am using 80-20 batting, which means part of it is polyester. So when I do press it, it does tend to very slightly melt a little bit. So I'm trying not to keep my iron too much on it, but having that polyester within it, it helps it melt and keep its shape towards the back. So you're going to do the exact same thing on this side. Right now, since I already have my iron on, what I'm going to do is attach the label to the back. Some people like to have fabric woven labels. I have discovered a method that works for me that I really like, especially on a piece that's not going to be ironed. I mean, that's not going to be washed. So I want to make sure that the piece is the correct orientation because I want to put it in the bottom right corner. And what I already have these printed. If you want to see how I've made these labels, check my YouTube channel. I will link this video below, but these are printed on my home printer and using printable HTV heat transfer vinyl. I'm going to peel this off. And it's kind of like a little rubbery type of label. I know I will not be stitching on that side. And with my hot iron but no steam, I'm just going to put a little piece of parchment paper on top. I don't want my iron to touch that directly. And I'm just going to melt that directly into my fabric. You do not have to stitch on it. Again, if you are washing this piece, then this label might discolor in the meantime. But right now, as you can see, it is fused and melted into my quilt. And it has a little bit of stretch with the quilt. Once it cools off, it'll be even better. I'm going to stitch this by hand tonight, and tomorrow I'm going to show you what it looks like. When I hang my pieces, I don't like to put anything on the back, but you can very easily put a little loop of a ribbon that you can use on each side that is not visible. Just stitch it by hand. You can insert the loop in here into the facing if you want to have it hanging. I don't put anything on my quilts, anything that I want hanging, because I actually use straight pins, stick them right through my my projects and put them into drywall. So that's my easy, lazy way to attach my pieces to my wall. I have finished sewing this lion by hand. I really like the way it looks. It gives it that nice finished edge. And on the back, I have sewn the sides first, and I unfolded this side a little bit more while I sewed all the way up. And then I simply stitched the top and the bottom. It gives it a very nice finished edge that you cannot see from the front. But if you were to look a little bit from the side, you have a little bit of this beautiful pink peeking through. So I'm very happy with this facing, and this is a very, very easy way that you can use, a very easy method that you can use for your wall hangings if you do not want to do binding all the way around. We've just finished this beautiful small quilt, creating a beautiful polished look without adding binding. If you enjoyed this tutorial, remember to like this video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what would you like to see next. And if you'd like a free quilt pattern, check out the links below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm eager to see how you use this technique to finish your small quilts, and be sure to share them with me. Until next time, keep those machines sewing, enjoy every moment, and most importantly, have fun. Happy quilting!